It doesn't matter how powerful, how rich, or how feared a criminal kingpin becomes, their reign almost always ends. And what's really fascinating is that their downfall, it tends to follow a very predictable and very violent pattern. See, a kingpin isn't just a criminal. They're the head of a huge, complex organization. And when you take them out, you create this power vacuum that violence just rushes in to fill. Okay, let's get into it. So how exactly does it all come crashing down? Well, that's the big question we're going to break down here. We're going to look at the fates of 4 of the most notorious cartel leaders in modern history. Each one is basically a case study in how power, paranoia, and violence lead to a totally inevitable end. First up, we've got Antonio Ezequiel Cardenas Guillen, better known as Tony Tormenta. As the leader of the Gulf Cartel, he had his own private army of ex-cops called Los Scorpiones. And his tactics were so extreme that he's a perfect example of a guy whose downfall was destined to be just as brutal as his time on top. Then, you've got Gonzalo Rodriguez Gacha, or El Mexicano. Now, while Tormenta focused his violence on specific rivals like the Zetas, El Mexicano, a founder of the Medellin cartel, he declared war on pretty much everyone. We're talking the government, other cartels, even his old allies. The guy's name basically became synonymous with terror. But not all these guys were so out in the open. We're also going to look at Helmer Pacho Herrera. He was one of the 4 godfathers of the super powerful Cali cartel, and he was a man who operated in the shadows. That made him way more elusive, but as we're about to see, it didn't make him any less vulnerable. And our final figure is Arturo Beltran Leyva, the boss of bosses. He's famous for his dramatic split from El Chapo's Sinaloa cartel after his brother got arrested. He blamed El Chapo for betrayal, broke away, and lit the match on a bloody civil war that made him one of the government's top targets. Okay, so the first way these guys go down is often the most spectacular: an all-out siege. This is what happens when the government decides one person is just too dangerous to be left alone, and they throw the full weight of their military right at them. And if you want to understand what overwhelming force really means, just look at this number. That's how many Mexican Marines were sent to take down one guy, Tony Tormenta. We're not talking about a small team. We're talking about a force the size of a battalion for a single target. And this right here shows you what that looked like on November 5th, 2010. The government didn't just raid a house. They shut down an entire city. For hours, Matamoros was a literal war zone. They cut the cell service, cartel gunmen were hijacking buses to block the streets, snipers were firing from rooftops, and over 300 grenades went off. This wasn't an arrest, it was an invasion. A really similar fate was waiting for Arturo Beltran Leyva. You see, his choice to break from the Sinaloa cartel wasn't just some business move. It turned Mexico into a battlefield between guys who used to be allies. And that forced the government's hand. His level of brutality made taking him out a national priority. Now, this is what's so interesting. When you look at this, you can see a clear government playbook for taking out these high-value targets. You've got the huge citywide siege for Tormenta, or the intense 90-minute gun battle in an apartment building for Beltran Leyva. The core elements are exactly the same: hundreds of elite troops, armored vehicles, helicopter gunships. The goal isn't just to make an arrest, it's total elimination. But a full-blown military assault isn't the only way these empires crumble. Let's look at the second path, which is maybe even more insidious: betrayal. Because, as it turns out, sometimes the most dangerous enemy you have is the person standing right beside you. By the late 80s, Gonzalo Rodriguez Gacha, El Mexicano, had made an enemy out of pretty much everyone. I mean, his empire was stretched thin, fighting wars on all these different fronts. And that kind of pressure, it makes you paranoid. And more importantly, it makes you vulnerable to an attack from inside your own circle. This timeline just lays out his end perfectly. It wasn't some massive army that found him. It was one person. An informant who was secretly on the payroll of the rival Cali cartel didn't just give up his location. He actually escaped with him, feeding intel to the police the whole time. Gacha was hunted down and killed by helicopter gunships, all because he trusted the wrong guy. And Pacho Herrera's end, well, it goes to show you that even surrender doesn't guarantee you're safe. After the Cali cartel was dismantled, he turned himself in, but his long-running beef with the rival Norte del Valle cartel, that followed him right behind bars. The walls that were supposed to hold him, they ended up becoming his tomb. The way this went down is just, it's chilling. So Herrera's playing football inside the prison. A man he considered a trusted advisor, someone he'd known for years, walks onto the field. Herrera stops the game, goes over to greet him with a hug. And in that one moment of trust, the guy pulls a gun and executes him on orders from the Norte del Valle cartel. A stunning end delivered by someone he thought was a friend. So you see the pattern, right? Whether it's a military siege or a traitor's bullet, the kingpin falls. But this is where the story takes its darkest turn. The death of a leader hardly ever brings peace. Instead, it creates that vacuum we talked about, and that void is almost always filled with even more violence. It's the one question that hangs over every single one of these high-profile takedowns. Does getting rid of the leader actually solve the problem? Does the violence finally stop? The answer, almost universally, is a hard no. This quote here, which is about what happened after another major kingpin died, it just sums it up perfectly. When the leader is gone, their lieutenants, their rivals, all these splinter groups, they immediately launch a vicious war to grab control of the territory and the routes left behind. So this is the crucial takeaway. It's a cycle. A figure rises to the top through violence. They eventually get eliminated, either by overwhelming force from the outside or betrayal from the inside. This creates a power vacuum, which ignites a brutal war for succession, and out of that war, a new and often even more ruthless kingpin emerges. The whole pattern just repeats itself, which forces us to ask, is this a cycle that can ever actually be broken?